There are 1,000 ways to die in battle, but only one that defies the gods themselves, to be forgotten. The night before the storm, Legate Marcus Aelius stood upon the ramparts of the Roman encampment near Britannia's northern frontier, watching the sky twist into colors no mortal had ever seen. Greens bled into violet, crimson into black. The air hummed like a legion's war horn stretched across the heavens. Soldiers murmured of omens, of Jupiter's wrath, of Mars demanding blood, of witchcraft. Aelius dismissed their fears with a scowl. "Rome fears no storm," he told his men. Yet deep within, unease coiled. The wind was wrong, heavy with the scent of burning metal and distant screams that were not of this world. The sky tore open. A blinding light poured from a rift that spanned the horizon, shimmering like molten glass. Legion banners flapped violently, horses reared, and every torch in camp extinguished at once. In that moment, reality fractured. The earth itself convulsed beneath the legion's sandaled feet. When the light died, the night was gone. The legion found themselves beneath a blood-red sky. The air stank of ozone and ash. The stars were unfamiliar, jagged, bleeding shapes twisting above like wounds in the firmament. Around them lay a wasteland of shattered iron and glass dunes stretching to infinity. The forests and moors of Britannia were gone, replaced by rusted wrecks of machines large as temples. "By the gods," whispered Centurion Cassian, gripping his gladius tight. "What sorcery is this?" Legate Aelius raised his shield, the sigil of the Aquila glinting dimly in the crimson haze. "Form ranks, standards high, we march at dawn." But there was no dawn. The sun never rose. Instead, the ground trembled beneath distant thunder, not of storms, but of engines. Colossal shapes moved on the horizon, walking upon pillars of flame. Metallic titans, their forms cloaked in dust and fire, each stride shaking the earth. The Romans fell to their knees, thinking they had witnessed the march of gods. "Are those statues?" a soldier breathed. "No," said Aelius softly. "They are moving." He did not know that he was watching Imperial knights patrol the blasted wastes of a forgotten world in the 41st millennium. He did not know he stood in the shadow of the Imperium of man, a dominion far greater and far crueler than any empire of marble and iron. That night, the legion made camp among the ruins. Scouts returned with tales of twisted corpses, clad in blackened armor, their skulls fused into their helmets, their weapons still humming with heat centuries after death. The Romans dared not touch the relics. Their priests burned incense and prayed to Mars, asking protection against whatever infernal realm they had entered. The ground pulsed again, faint, rhythmic, like the beating of a buried heart. The earth cracked, revealing something vast beneath, black stone engraved with alien symbols that shimmered when looked upon. Aelius called for silence. "Men of Rome," he said, his voice low but steady, "we stand not in Britannia. We stand at the edge of the gods' realm, but we are Rome, and Rome bows to none." The men answered with a ragged cheer, desperate courage clinging to discipline. They reformed ranks, raised the aquila, and prepared to march. Yet as the standard was lifted, the sigil began to glow, not gold, but blue-white fire, rising like a living flame. The standard-bearer screamed, his flesh blistering as energy coursed through his veins. He fell, twitching, as the aquila burned brighter still, projecting a halo of impossible light that seared the shadows away. From beyond the dunes something roared in answer. The legion froze. The sound was not human nor beast. It was metallic, echoing through their bones. And then came the howling, the sound of machine spirits awakened from ancient slumber. Aelius turned to his second. "Sound the horns, ready the ranks. Whatever world this is, it knows we are here." The horns of Rome wailed across the dead wasteland, a sound that had not been heard in 10,000 years of human history. Somewhere in the warp's endless madness, something stirred. The old gods were silent, but new gods had taken notice. The Emperor's galaxy had a new arrival, a legion born of marble, discipline, and fire, and soon it would learn that not even time could break the will of Rome. When morning never came, the Romans realized the heavens themselves had abandoned them. The crimson sky remained fixed, a bleeding wound across eternity. No stars shifted, no wind stirred, even the air seemed to listen. Legate Marcus Aelius ordered the legion to march. The iron discipline that had conquered half the known world steadied men who otherwise would have broken beneath madness. Shields gleamed with the dull reflection of a world without sunlight, their polished bronze now scarred by drifting motes of ash. They advanced in formation across the wasteland, testudo held firm, banners raised high, gladii drawn. Every step echoed on strange metallic ground that rang hollow, as if the very world beneath them were nothing but a shell. "By Mars, even the earth feels wrong," muttered Cassian, his centurion's eyes narrowing. Aelius grunted. "If this be the realm of gods, then let us walk as Romans and not as frightened slaves." They passed rusted husks of titanic vehicles, their wheels taller than siege towers. Some bore sigils worn by time, twin-headed eagles carved in relief, wings spread in divine majesty. Others were defaced, etched with jagged runes that hurt to look upon. Aelius paused before one colossal ruin, a fallen giant of steel, its skull-like helm cracked open to reveal a hollow interior filled with black ash. "Is this a god?" he asked softly. A priest stepped forward, face smeared with soot and sacred oil. No mortal could fashion such a thing. It must be the corpse of Vulcan himself. The legate frowned. Then Vulcan fell hard. A ripple of nervous laughter broke through the ranks, brief, brittle, human. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. Time itself seemed strange, measured not by the sun's arc, but by exhaustion and the rhythm of marching boots. Scouts sent ahead reported strange ruins that hummed when touched, and a dry riverbed filled not with water, but with glittering sand that shimmered as if alive. That was when they found the bones. Pale, twisted skeletons, human, yet not, Some had elongated skulls fused with metal. Others had extra limbs or hollowed ribs that contained still smoldering ash. The legion's priests demanded purification rites, fearing contagion or witchcraft. Aelius permitted it. He did not understand what they faced, but he would not let fear spread. As incense burned and Latin prayers echoed, one of the youngest soldiers, a boy barely 17, approached the legate. "My lord," he whispered, "what if we are dead?" Aelius regarded him. His eyes reflected the red horizon. He said, "Then we march into hell and we conquer it." That night they made camp near a black spire that pierced the clouds. It seemed to hum with a faint pulse, almost like a heartbeat. No fire could stay lit for long. Every flame flickered blue and died, devoured by unseen winds. Sentries reported whispers in the dark, voices speaking Latin backwards, soft at first, then rising in unison like a chant. Roma mortiur. Rome is dying. Cassian ordered the men to form a defensive ring. The legion readied pila and shields, their discipline unbroken, even as terror clawed at their minds. But the voices faded, leaving only the hum of the spire. At dawn, though dawn was merely a deeper shade of red, the Romans found tracks circling their camp. Not animal, not man. The prints were deep and heavy, shaped like claws dragging molten metal. The legate stood silently, studying them. He said finally, "We are being hunted. By what, I do not yet know." He drew his gladius and held it high. "Romans, whatever beasts dwell in this cursed land, remember who we are. We are the sons of Mars, the daughters of Rome. There is no land we cannot tame, no enemy we cannot face." The soldiers roared their answer, defiance echoing across the dead plains. Then, on the horizon, the dust began to move. A column of figures appeared, human silhouettes, clad in armor that gleamed faintly through the haze. For a moment hope stirred among the legionaries. Perhaps survivors, perhaps gods who looked kindly upon them. But as they drew near, the Romans saw what their minds refused to name. The strangers bore armor of dark ceramite, faces hidden behind blank visors, weapons humming with blue fire. They moved with military precision, their steps measured, their formation perfect, and at their center, a banner depicting the same double-headed eagle carved into the ruins. One of the Romans shouted, "Legionaries of another Rome!" The legate squinted. "No," he murmured, "not Rome. Something colder." The strangers halted 100 paces away. One raised a device to his mouth, a vox speaker, though the Romans could not know the word, and a harsh metallic voice thundered across the wastes. "Identify yourselves. You trespass upon the emperor's soil." The Romans exchanged confused glances. The word meant nothing to them, yet carried the weight of divine command. Aelius stepped forward, spear in hand. "We are the 20th Legion of the divine Emperor Tiberius Caesar. We claim no trespass. We march where the will of Rome commands." The soldiers of the Imperium looked at one another, their helmets turning slightly as though processing madness. Then, without warning, one of them raised his lasgun. The air split with light. Aelius's shield shattered. The soldier beside him fell, chest burned through by pure energy. Screams erupted as the Romans scrambled to form ranks. Pila flew, clattering harmlessly off the Imperial's armor. Cassian roared, "Testudo! Shields up!" The ancient formation closed, gladii stabbing through the gaps as the air filled with the thunder of lassfire. The clash of ages had begun, bronze against plasteel, courage against technology, history itself against the future. And the gods, old and new, watched in silence. When the battle ended, the field stank of ozone, blood, and burning flesh. The ground was scorched black where the strange weapons had struck. Men lay where they fell, shields melted to their arms, gladii cracked from impossible heat. Legate Marcus Aelius stood amid the ruin, face streaked with soot, and gazed at the corpses of the metal-clad warriors who had attacked them. A dozen had fallen under Roman spears and desperate fury, their armor rent open by sheer persistence and the gods' grace, or perhaps by luck. Cassian knelt beside one of them, prying loose a helmet the size of a cauldron. Beneath it was a pale human face, scarred, tattooed, and dead-eyed. "They're men," he muttered in disbelief. "Men like us." "No," said Aelius quietly, his gaze fixed on the still humming weapon at the corpse's side. "These are the children of gods, or devils wearing men's flesh." He reached out to touch the fallen soldier's weapon, a lasgun, and pain shot through his arm. A crackle of blue energy burst across the sand, burning his fingertips. He dropped it, grimacing. The weapon pulsed faintly, a small light flickering near the handle. "By Vulcan's forge," Cassian whispered, "a weapon that breathes." The legion formed ranks once more, battered but unbroken. They counted nearly 80 dead, a fraction that would cripple a lesser army, but Aelius refused to retreat. "Rome does not yield to ghosts, nor shall we yield to the gods of iron." As they moved through the aftermath, they found other strange relics. Black-plated armor bearing the same two-headed eagle, badges etched with words they could not read, and a small statue of a crowned figure carved in gold. It bore the likeness of a man, stern and eternal, his eyes cast downward as if in judgment. Their priest fell to his knees before it. "The Emperor," he murmured, "a new god has revealed himself." Aelius regarded it grimly. "Then let us see if he hears prayers." That night they built a pyre of the dead, Roman and stranger alike. The flames climbed high, though the air burned thin and metallic. The men prayed to Jupiter, to Mars, and now tentatively to this new emperor god, whose image glowed in the firelight. But far beyond the flames, something else stirred. From the wreckage of the fallen Imperials, a vox beacon began to blink, its transmission whispering across the barren world. A single signal repeated over and over. Contact lost, Xenos or warp anomaly detected, location Cestus Prime. In the depths of orbit above that cursed world, a listening post received it and responded. The Romans did not know it yet, but an Imperial Guard patrol ship had already set course. Reinforcements were coming, not to rescue, but to purge. By the second dawn that was not arrived, the Romans had fortified their camp atop the ruins of what they believed to be a fallen temple. In truth, the shattered remains of an administratum relay tower. Its walls still bore imperial script, carved deep into ferroconcrete, which the priests now treated as holy text. One line, half buried in dust, read, "The Emperor protects." Cassian approached Aelius as he oversaw the ramparts. "The men whisper that this emperor may be Mars reborn. They say he sent us here." Aelius studied the broken landscape. "If he did, I would question his mercy." Their conversation ended when a shout rang from the Northern Watch. A shape moved across the wasteland. Not a man, not a machine, but something in between. A creature of bone and wire, crawling like a spider across the sand, its limbs clicking in rhythmic prayer. Its face was a skull of iron, its eyes glowing red. The Romans froze. "By Pluto's hand," Cassian breathed. "What is that?" The creature halted, scanning them. Then its mechanical voice rasped through the air. "Biological anomaly. Terran descent pattern. Designate lost human stock." Aelius didn't wait for more. "Javelins!" The pila flew, half shattered against its metal hide, but one struck a joint and lodged deep. The machine screamed, a sound like tearing metal mixed with human agony. Sparks burst from its wound as it fell, limbs twitching. When the Romans surrounded it, they saw that beneath the metal was withered human flesh stitched into the machine's core. The priest made the sign of the cross instinctively, though that symbol held no power here. "Gods preserve us," he whispered. "Man and metal, bound together." "Is it alive?" Cassian asked. Aelius shook his head. "No, it's suffering." He raised his gladius and ended it. The machine's red eyes dimmed, but in its death throes it spot one final word, "Adeptus Mechanicus," before collapsing into silence. The name meant nothing to them, yet the moment the word faded, the ground trembled again. The Romans turned to see distant lights approaching from the horizon, a phalanx of machines moving in formation, tanks, aircraft, and ranks of soldiers clad in flak armor under the fluttering banners of the Astra Militarum. Cassian grinned bitterly. "More of the gods of iron." Aelius set his jaw. "Then we will meet them as men." He ordered the horns sounded, shields rose, banners unfurled. The Aquila shimmered in the red light, its edges now faintly glowing with warp-born energy. Far above, on board an Imperial ship descending through the clouds, a commissar prepared his troops. Target identified. Non-imperial human formation. Likely heretical mutation. By the authority of the Emperor, they are to be cleansed. The Romans below could not hear him, but the Emperor's galaxy had taken notice. The wasteland screamed with thunder. Dust spiraled into the blood-red sky as the Astra Militarum descended in force. Armored transports rumbling across the plains, engines howling like beasts. Above, a Valkyrie gunship cut through the air, its wings shedding contrails of black smoke. The Romans had faced chariots, siege towers, even elephants, but never this. To them, it was as if Mars himself had sent chariots of fire to test their courage. Legate Marcus Aelius stood upon the broken wall of the ruins, his crimson cloak billowing in the heat of the approaching storm. "Romans," he bellowed, voice carrying through the ranks, "these are no gods. They bleed as all enemies do. Raise the eagle, let them know the strength of Rome." The Aquilifer lifted the standard. The golden eagle, now faintly alive with strange blue fire, blazed against the darkness. Then came the first salvo. Bolts of light tore into the Roman front line. Shields exploded in molten spray, armor scorched black. Men screamed, falling where they stood. Still the centurions barked orders. "Form testudo! Advance!" The shields locked tight, an iron shell of discipline forged through centuries of conquest. The last fire struck again and again, hissing against bronze. Some shots pierced through, burning holes clean through men's torsos, but the formation held. Astra Militarum Sergeant Callus watched through his scope, disbelief twisting his face. "By the throne," he muttered, "they're advancing through Lasfire." His commissar, a tall figure draped in black, did not flinch. "Then teach them to stop. Fire for effect." The wasteland lit up as mortars thumped, sending shells screaming down. Explosions ripped through the Roman ranks. Dust and blood filled the air, fragments of shields and limbs tumbling together. Yet through it all, through smoke, flame, and ruin, the Romans marched. They chanted in unison, voices raw, "Roma invicta! Roma invicta!" Unconquered Rome. The chant rolled like thunder, defying the mechanical storm. Even the imperial gunners hesitated for a heartbeat. It was not courage they heard, it was faith, the kind that did not break even in hell. When the distance closed, the Romans hurled their pila, 1,000 spears soared, primitive weapons that shattered against ceramite armor, but a few found gaps, impaling unprotected flesh. Imperial troopers fell, their blood mingling with that of men 2,000 years out of time. Then the Romans charged. Cassian led the first cohort, Claudius high. They slammed into the imperial line with the fury of ancient gods reborn, bronze against plasteel, human roar against machine thunder. The Imperial's lasguns were too slow in the melee. One soldier's weapon was knocked aside, and his head split open by a single stroke. Another fell beneath the weight of 5 Romans, stabbing and screaming, until silence claimed him. Sergeant Callus swung his lasgun like a club, shouting into the vox, "They're not mutants, they're men! Emperor, save us, they're men!" "Mutants don't matter, only obedience matters," the commissar hissed, drawing his bolt pistol. He raised the weapon and fired. Callus's chest erupted in a flash of blood and smoke. The commissar turned to his command vox. "Purge order confirmed. No survivors." The Romans fought like lions, but the Imperials had the Emperor's wrath made flesh, lasfire, plasma, and grenade. Within minutes, the battlefield became an inferno. Cassian saw men he had trained since youth burned alive, their flesh turned to light. He drove his sword into an Imperial trooper's gut, wrenching it free with a cry of rage. "You call this divine mercy?" he roared to the sky. A blast tore through the wall beside him, flinging him through the air. He hit the ground hard, vision swimming. Through the smoke, he saw Legate Aelius standing at the center of the storm, blood streaming down his arm, shouting orders with the calm of a man born to command. Then came the sound that froze both sides, the deep, rhythmic boom of something colossal moving across the plain. The Valkyrie broke formation and veered aside as the shape emerged, a towering machine of war, limbs of steel, and a weapon large as a siege tower mounted upon its arm, a sentinel walker. The Romans stared as it loomed over them, each step shaking the earth. "By Jupiter's blood," whispered a soldier, "the god of war walks among them." Aelius raised his sword. "Then Mars himself will know our names." He gave the signal. Ballista turned, firing heavy iron bolts that sparked harmlessly against the walker's armor. The machine rotated, its multi-laser whining as it powered up. The first burst tore through 50 men. The second shattered the eagle standard. The Aquilifer screamed as the banner burst into flames, yet even burning, the Aquila blazed brighter than before. The blue warp light flared into white brilliancy. The flames did not consume it, they fed it. Every soldier felt it, a surge of something divine, something terrible. The air trembled, and for a moment the last fire faltered. Aelius seized the moment. "Romans, strike now! For the Emperor, our Emperor!" The name came unbidden from his lips. The men repeated it instinctively. "For the Emperor!" They charged again, driven by fury and faith. The clash renewed, redoubled. But no faith could stop what was coming. The Imperial gunships descended, wings blazing with exhaust fire. The Commissar gave the final order: cleanse the anomaly, burn everything. Fire fell from heaven. When the smoke cleared, the ruins were silent. Only a handful of Romans remained alive, coughing amid ash and molten earth. Among them, Aelius, half buried, gripping the blackened remains of the Aquila. As he raised his eyes to the burning sky, he saw shapes descending on ropes, armored figures in black, their helmets adorned with the sigil of the imperial Aquila. The voice that came from their vox was calm, mechanical, and final. "By decree of the Emperor of mankind, you are under arrest for heresy." Aelius spat blood and smiled. "Then take me to your god. I have questions." When Marcus Aelius awoke, it was to a silence more terrifying than battle. He lay in a cold cell of black stone and steel, chained by the wrists, his armor stripped, his weapons gone. The air was thin, humming faintly with unseen energy. Symbols were carved into every wall: the twin-headed eagle, the cog of Mars, the sigils of purity wards, written in high Gothic script. None of it made sense to him, yet he felt their weight. The door opened with a hiss. A figure entered, tall, clad in a greatcoat of black leather, cap adorned with the imperial insignia. A scar traced down his face like a knife wound that had never healed. His eyes were hard, merciless. "Legate Marcus Aelius," he said in a clipped voice, "commander of an unknown militant force. You stand accused of heresy, witchcraft, and insurrection against the Imperium of man." Aelius blinked. "Imperium?" He struggled to sit. "What empire is this?" The man's jaw tightened. "The empire, the only one that matters. The Imperium of mankind, under the divine light of the Emperor." "Your Emperor," Aelius said, testing the words. "I have heard his name. A god of iron, yes? We fought his soldiers." "You slaughtered loyal servants of his will," the commissar replied coldly. "Be grateful you still draw breath." Aelius laughed, the sound low and rough. "If your god desired my death, I would be ash already." The commissar's eyes narrowed. "Blasphemy!" He struck Aelius across the face with his gloved hand. "Your words are heretical." Blood ran down the legate's chin, but he did not flinch. "Then let me meet this god of yours, and we shall see whose will prevails." The commissar hesitated. For the briefest moment, the Roman's defiance seemed to unsettle him. He gestured to the guards. "Bring him." They led Aelius through endless corridors, iron halls illuminated by flickering lumen strips, filled with the faint stench of oil and sanctified incense. He passed other cells where the surviving Romans were held. Some prayed, others raged. Cation caught his gaze as they passed. "Legate!" the centurion shouted, straining against his chains. "The men speak of gods of metal, of a new Rome above the stars." "Steady your faith, Cation," Aelius answered. "We stand before kings of fire and thunder, but they bleed as men do." The guards shoved him onward. They emerged into a chamber vast as a temple. The walls were lined with machinery and icons, and in the center stood a raised dais surrounded by robed figures, tech priests, their flesh replaced with machinery, faces hidden behind glowing optics. Incense hissed from steel censers as servo arms moved in ritual motion. A massive holographic sigil flickered above them, a planet spinning slowly. Cestus Prime. One of the tech priests turned toward the commissar. His voice was like a whisper of gears. "Subject displays linguistic pattern consistent with early Terran dialects, pre-Dark Age of technology. Approximation Latin." The commissar frowned. "You're telling me these savages are Terrans?" "Affirmative," the tech priest replied. "Genetic scans confirm pure human strain. Anomalously archaic. Probability of temporal displacement 97.3%. Aelius stood in stunned silence. He understood little, but one word echoed in his mind. Terrans. Children of Terra. Earth. "Then this Imperium," he murmured. "It rose from Rome." "Blasphemous conjecture," the commissar snapped. "The Emperor created humanity in his image, not the other way around." Aelius smiled faintly. "Then your god was a Roman." The tech priest's optical lenses whirred, focusing on Aelius. "Fascinating. Primitive yet coherent theology. Recommend containment, not execution." "Containment?" The commissar's hand twitched toward his bolt pistol. "These men attacked an Imperial patrol." "They also fought with discipline unseen in feral worlds. Their tactics mirror ancient Terran militaria. To destroy them would be to erase a piece of the Emperor's own history." The commissar glared, but said nothing. He holstered his weapon reluctantly. "Very well. The Inquisition will decide their fate." Hours later, Aelius and Cation were reunited in a transport cell as the ship rumbled upward into orbit. Through a small viewport, they saw stars like molten silver scattered across a black ocean. For the first time, the Romans realized they were not beneath the sky, but among the heavens themselves. "Are we dead?" Cation whispered. "No," Aelius said, awe and dread mixing in his voice. "We have found the true empire." As they ascended, a Vox transmission crackled through the ship, the distant recorded voice of an inquisitor. "Preserve the specimens. The Order Kronos will wish to study them. Their existence suggests temporal instability near Cestus Prime, perhaps a warp tear." Aelius didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Judgment. When the ship docked, the prisoners were led out under armed escort. Before them loomed a fortress of impossible scale, spires rising into orbit, bridges spanning clouds, cathedrals carved into steel mountains. Everywhere burned candles in the millions, and the air was filled with endless chanting. "The Emperor protects, the Emperor endures." Cassian whispered, "Is this Olympus?" Aelius stared, wonder and fury blazing behind his eyes. "No, this is what Rome would have become had we conquered the stars." They were marched into the heart of the fortress, to be judged, dissected, and remembered only as relics of mankind's forgotten dawn. But fate had other plans. One of the tech priests watching them through the security feed froze in mid-motion. On his Auspex screen, lines of ancient code appeared unbidden, overlaying the image of the prisoners. Latin text flickering like a ghost from history. Legio Roma Aeterna, the Empire never dies. And in the depths of the ship, the Aquila, sealed in a containment vault, began to glow once more. In the sanctum of the Mechanicus, aboard the orbiting fortress, the golden Aquila, relic of ancient Rome, pulsed with unnatural energy. Sacred machinery around it flickered, servitors convulsed, and binary hymns broke into distorted screams of static. Magos Biologicus Tertian 9 approached the containment chamber, mechanodendrites twitching. "Energy levels rising beyond predicted threshold. Origin anomalous. Not warp, not plasma, not psychic." He turned to his assistant, a robed acolyte, whose eyes glowed with faint augmetics. "Trace the signal." "Attempting, Magos," the acolyte murmured, fingers darting across the rune console. "But it's interfacing with our systems directly. It's rewriting the encryption protocols in—" The lights dimmed. The Aquila flared white-hot, projecting a holographic form across the chamber. A towering figure in imperial garb of a style unseen in 10,000 years. Laurel crown, crimson cloak, and eyes that burned like molten gold. The machine spirits howled. "Legio Roma Aeterna. My sons endure. My empire endures." Every servo skull in the chamber dropped lifeless from the air. Tertian's augmetic seized as binary prayers choked in his throat. "Impossible! Data corruption! This cannot! You built your empire upon my ashes. You worship the image of what you once were. You call your god emperor, but I was emperor first." The Aquila detonated in a flare of radiant light. When it cleared, every data slate in the sanctum bore the same message in burning script. "Roma Invicta, the eternal empire awakens." Far below, in the fortress cells, Aelius jolted upright. His chains glowed red-hot and shattered as if struck by lightning. Cassian gasped as his own bonds broke free, the metal clattering to the floor. "What sorcery is this?" Cassian breathed. Aelius stood, chest heaving, eyes wide. "Not sorcery, legacy." A blaring alarm erupted throughout the station. Red lumen lights stromed. Overhead voxcasters screamed. Containment breach in Mechanicus Sanctum. Machine spirits destabilizing. Security lockdown in progress. The cell doors opened with a hiss, automated failsafes misfiring as systems failed. Roman soldiers stumbled into the corridor, bewildered but free. "Centuries," Aelius barked, instantly commanding. "Regroup, form ranks." Men who had fought with discipline on muddy fields of Gaul now found themselves in a labyrinth of steel corridors, but their instincts were unchanged. Shields raised, spears scavenged from fallen servitors, they advanced with brutal precision. "By Mars and Jupiter we fight as one," Aelius roared. Elsewhere, Commissar Halbert stormed toward the Mechanicus Sanctum, bolt pistol drawn, vox bead crackling. "Magos, Tertian, report. What is happening?" The reply was a shriek of binary static, then silence. Halbert entered the sanctum, just as the doors buckled outward from the inside. A wave of blinding light surged through, and something impossible walked out. A figure in golden armor, Roman in design yet burning with power. Every inch of it inscribed with both cogwork circuitry and Latin scripture. A crown of iron laurels rested upon its helm. "Identify yourself," Halbert bellowed, aiming his pistol. The figure's eyes flared. "I am the will of Empire Eternal. You are my inheritors, or my usurpers." Halbert fired. The bolt round struck the figure's chest and exploded, but the golden armor absorbed the impact, its energy dispersing into motes of light. Then the voice came again, deeper, resonating through the walls. "Rome does not die. She waits, and now she remembers." Halbert fell to one knee, the sheer psychic pressure crushing his mind. Images flooded his vision. Legions marching under burning suns, banners bearing the Aquila, the rise and fall of empires long buried by time. When his consciousness flickered back, the figure was gone, but the Aquila sigil glowed across every screen on the station. Aelius and his men reached the docking bay. Sirens howled as servitors malfunctioned, doors slammed open and shut, and security turrets turned against their masters. Through the observation glass, they saw hundreds of ships in orbit, the full might of the Imperium's fleet above Cestus Prime, all with vox traffic in chaos. "Legate!" Cassian shouted, pointing. A massive cruiser nearby was changing course, its thrusters firing erratically, systems overridden. Across its hull words burned in searing fire. "Legio Roma Aeterna." Aelius stared, awestruck. "The Empire calls us." The Romans boarded a shuttle bay where Mechanicus transport skiffs were docked. One of the younger soldiers, trembling, asked, "Can we fly these beasts?" Aelius looked at the control console, incomprehensible runes glowing faintly. He placed his hand upon the interface. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the machine answered. The runes translated themselves, not in Low Gothic, but in Latin. "Command recognized. Pilum protocol active. Destination, Roma Prima." Cassian gasped. "Roma Prima?" Aelius smiled grimly. "Where it all began, or where it will begin again." The engines roared. The shuttle tore free from the docking clamps and plunged into the void. Behind them, the station burned, half consumed by light, half swallowed in by the warp. And somewhere within that chaos, a single voice echoed through the fleet-wide vox. Roma invicta. The emperor remembers his first empire. Every imperial officer who heard it felt their faith falter, for the voice was not the emperor's, but something far older.
The Mechanicus transport tore through the void, flames streaking across its hull as it broke free of Cestus Prime's orbit. The stars shimmered like frozen gods. Inside the cockpit, Legate Marcus Aelius stood among the flickering glow of runes and auspex displays he did not understand, yet somehow recognized. The Latin inscription still glowed faintly on the console. Roma primus, coordinata detecta, course locked. Cassian steadied himself beside the legate, eyes wide with awe. "Where does it take us, Marcus?" Aelius stared into the endless dark, voice low. "Home, perhaps, or the grave of it." Across the fleet above Cestus Prime, confusion reigned. Vox relays sputtered nonsense. Ships reported hallucinations of legionaries appearing in their corridors, murmuring prayers in a dead tongue. Imperial banners briefly flickered, replaced by the image of a golden eagle, wings unfurled, haloed in light. Inquisitor Valeria Dorn watched from the command deck of her battle-cruiser Saint Vigilant, her face stone-cold beneath her rosarious glow. "Purge the station," she ordered. "No trace of the anomaly is to remain." An adjutant hesitated. "But, Inquisitor, the data logs suggest temporal instability, a relic of old Terra." Dorn turned sharply. "Then it belongs in the Emperor's archives, not the hands of ghosts. Fire!" Lances of energy struck from orbit, vaporizing what remained of the Mechanicus Sanctum and the Romans left behind. The heavens blazed like Judgment Day. But deep in the warp, something stirred, vast and ancient. The voice of the Aquila echoed through immaterium currents like a hymn resurrected from history. Roma invicta, the Empire Eternal returns. On board the shuttle, Aelius and his surviving century braced as the stars stretched into lines, warp jump. The soldiers clutched their shields, whispering prayers to gods who had never heard of the warp. The reality around them melted into impossible color, shapes moving in the void, whispering through steel. Cassian gritted his teeth. "By Mars, what realm is this?" Aelius said grimly. "The land of your gods, perhaps, or of theirs. For hours the warp twisted them, yet something shielded their vessel, an unseen hand, golden and vast, carved of light and memory. The Aquila on the control screen pulsed steadily, holding reality at bay. And then, with a scream of engines and light, they emerged. Before them hung a planet, blue oceans, brown continents, white clouds, Terra, Earth, but not as they had known it. The planet was scarred, colossal fortress structures piercing the atmosphere. Vast rings circled the globe like chains of iron prayer. Whole continents glowed under the light of industry. The stars around it bristled with orbital defenses and ships the size of mountains. Aelius gazed in silent awe. Jupiter's beard! Cassian fell to his knees. We have returned to the cradle of men. No, Aelius said softly. We have come to its tomb. Their ship's vox crackled, and a cold mechanical voice spoke. In registered craft detected. Transmit Imperial clearance code immediately. Failure to comply will result in annihilation. Aelius leapt to the console. More Latin text appeared, as if the machine itself defied the order. Roma Aeterna override. Authority Legate Marcus Aelius. Legio Tredicima. Access granted. Static filled the channel, then silence. The defense platform ceased firing. Pathways through the orbital grid opened, one after another. Cassian blinked. They're letting us through! The legate smiled grimly. The machines remember their masters. They descended through Terra's storm-racked skies, through layers of pollution and prayer fields, until the city world revealed itself, a continent of cathedrals, foundries, and endless stone. The shuttle guided itself, landing in a vast courtyard lined with statues of the emperor, each one colossal, each one scarred by time. The Romans disembarked, armor scorched, but spirits unbroken. Awaiting them was a procession of adepts in red robes and gold masks. They bowed in eerie unison. The leader, Archmagos Tertian IX, his augmetics now repaired and glimmering, stepped forward. Legate Marcus Aelius, he intoned, by decree of the Omnissiah, you are expected. Aelius frowned. Expected? You destroyed our world. Correction. Cestus Prime was a site of contamination. Your arrival was foreseen. By whom? The Magos raised his servo hand toward the horizon. By him. The Romans turned and saw the imperial palace of Terra. The sight stole their breath. A mountain of gold, rising higher than clouds, crowned by the Astronomicon's eternal light. Thousands of banners flapped in the smog winds, each marked with the sigil of the Aquila. The Emperor awaits, the Magos said. They marched through sanctified halls. Incense filled the air. Chanting thundered from unseen chapels. Servitors bowed as they passed, recognizing in them some old code written into human memory. At last they came to a chamber vast as a nation. The golden throne stood before them, and upon it the God Emperor of mankind. Aelius and his men fell to their knees. Light spilled from the throne like the birth of a sun, searing their eyes, burning into their souls. A voice, not sound, but command, filled their minds. Children of the First Empire, ye return at last. Aelius trembled. Are you my emperor? I am he you once worshipped as Jupiter, as soul, as god and king. I watched your empire fall and rise again through shadow and flame. Tears streaked Aelius's scarred face. "Then we have returned to serve." "Yes," the emperor said, "but the galaxy is not what it was. The legions you once knew are dust. The Imperium rots under its own faith. You must remember what they have forgotten: humanity." Aelius bowed deeply. "Then command us, Lord. Rome stands ready." The emperor's gaze blazed. "Then rise, Legate, the second Rome shall march." Golden fire erupted around them, the blessing of the emperor himself. And in the data vaults of the Adeptus Mechanicus, across every ship, fortress, and shrine, one new file appeared in perfect High Gothic and ancient Latin alike. Project Roma Invicta, approved by the Golden Throne. The Empire of Man had just been reborn.
Days became weeks within the Palace of Terra, though time lost all meaning under the shadow of the Golden Throne. The Romans, once relics of a forgotten age, found themselves at the heart of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. But they were not idle. Aelius and his men were taken under the scrutiny of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the Custodian Guard alike. What began as analysis soon became awe. Their genetic purity, discipline, and martial spirit were unlike anything seen in 10,000 years. They were not mutants, not psychers, not even enhanced, yet their cohesion in battle simulations was perfect. "Pure human," murmured Magos Tertian IX, his mechanical voice filled with reverence. Unaltered by millennia of drift or augmentation, the original template of the Legiones Astartes progenitors. Even the custodians, golden giants of divine war, watched them with quiet interest. Aelius walked among his men in a grand chamber where the banners of Rome hung beside those of the Imperium. Tech priests moved among them, measuring, testing, and most importantly, listening. Cassian approached, holding a newly forged blade. It shimmered with a faint red light. "They call it a gladius pattern monoblade, Legate, cut through plasteel like butter." Aelius took it, weighing it in his hand. The balance was perfect, too perfect. "A sword without weight teaches a warrior nothing," he muttered, but his eyes gleamed. "Still, it will serve." "Serve for what, sir?" The legate turned toward the golden horizon of Terra. "For what we were born to do, conquer." The High Lords of Terra gathered soon after. The inquisitorial delegation, the Mechanicus representatives, the ecclesiastical priests, all debated in the shadow of the Emperor's will. Inquisitor Valeria Dorn stood among them, her face drawn tight with suspicion. "You would arm these primitives," she said coldly. "They are temporal anomalies, relics. They should be studied, not unleashed." "Relics," rasped Magos Tertian IX. "They are proof of human perfection, untainted by warp mutation or genetic corruption. The Emperor himself sanctioned their rebirth." Another lord, robed in white with the sigil of the Astra Militarum, leaned forward. "If the Emperor wills it, they will fight. The Imperial Guard bleeds across 1,000 worlds. A new legion of disciplined soldiers could stabilize half the segmentum."
Valeria slammed her hand on the table. A legion. We outlawed such formations after Horus. You would tempt history itself. Tercian's lenses gleamed. Perhaps history wishes to be tempted. The debate raged for hours until the chamber lights dimmed. A voice filled the air, thunderous, divine, absolute. Enough. The sound came from nowhere and everywhere, the psychic echo of the Emperor himself. You will not question my will. The Legione Roma Aeterna will march again. Their purpose will be to remind mankind of what it means to endure without mutation, to fight without corruption, to believe without blindness. The High Lords fell to their knees. Even Dorn bowed her head, trembling. Prepare them, the voice commanded, for war. Weeks later, in the shadow of the Imperial Palace, the Romans were remade. The forges of Mars crafted new armor for them, not the hulking ceramite shells of space marines, but something sleeker, reminiscent of their old lorica segmentata, yet woven with adamantium and powered by fiber bundles. Their helmets bore the aquila, their shields carried the sigil of the sun. They trained with bolters, laser carbines, and shock blades, adapting faster than their tutors believed possible. When shown the laser gun's operation, Aelius only smiled. A spear of light. The gods have armed us indeed. Their discipline spread like fire. Regiments of the Osti Militarum began adopting Roman formations for close quarters engagements. Chanting in Latin replaced low Gothic battle cries on parade grounds. The Imperium, fractured and weary, felt something stir. Pride. One evening, Aelius stood before the balcony overlooking the vast cityscape of Terra. He wore his new armor, crimson and gold, regal and terrible. Cassian joined him, silent for a time before speaking. "Do you think this is truly the Emperor's will?" Cassian asked quietly. "Or are we simply tools for another war?" Aelius did not answer immediately. He looked toward the golden light of the Astronomicon. "I have seen gods and kings. All of them demanded blood. But the Emperor, he demands endurance. Perhaps that is the same thing." Cassian smirked faintly. "So we fight for endurance?" "We fight for memory," Aelius replied. "Rome fell once. I will not let it fall again, not among the stars." In the following months, the Legione Roma Aeterna was unveiled to the Imperium. 10,000 soldiers marched in perfect unison through the streets of Terra. Red cloaks, shining armor, bolters held to their chests. At their head rode Aelius, the standard of the ancient Aquila reborn, glowing with holy fire. Billions watched the broadcast from across the Imperium. To some it was heresy, to others it was prophecy fulfilled. From the shrine worlds of the ecclesiarchy to the forges of Mars, the cry spread across Vox networks and psychic relays alike. Roma Invicta, the Empire Eternal, rises again. And in the darkness of the warp, things stirred. Demons whispered. Chaos gods laughed and took notice. For in resurrecting Rome, humanity had not only recalled its glory, it had also rekindled its ambition. And ambition, in the 41st millennium, is always the first sin. The rebirth of Rome did not go unnoticed. Beyond the veil of reality, in the roiling madness of the warp, four voices stirred. They had watched humanity's every triumph and tragedy since time began. But this was something new, something ancient reborn. In the palace of pleasure, Slanesh purred. How exquisite! They resurrect their own myths, sculpt their pride into armor, and call it virtue. Khorne roared from his crimson throne. Virtue or not, they will bleed. A new legion means new skulls. Tizinch's laughter echoed through the twisting labyrinth of fate. Oh, they are far more than soldiers, brother of rage. They are an idea, an old pattern reawakening. I feel the Emperor's design shifting around them. And in the putrid garden, Nurgle's chuckle rumbled like thunder. Let them bloom, my children of old terror. Even empires rot, even marble cracks, and when they do, I will claim them too. Thus the gods agreed. The Legio Roma Aeterna must be tested. On Terra, the Legate Marcus Aelius was restless. Training exercises had turned into ceremonial parades. Their warriors drilled under endless scrutiny, their every tactic analyzed, recorded, and replicated by the Ostra Militarum. Yet Aelius knew what the Emperor's final words meant. This was no mere pageant. The galaxy was waiting. And soon enough, orders arrived. Inquisitor Valeria Dorn herself appeared in the great hall of the Legio, flanked by Tempestus scions and servo-skulls humming with data. She did not bow, though the Romans did. "Legate Aelius," she said curtly, "by the command of the High Lords and the Golden Throne, you and your legion are to embark on your first campaign." Aelius rose from one knee. "Name the foe." "Chaos, a heretic uprising on the shrine world of Veneris IV, a planet sacred to the Emperor's own birthright, now defiled by the word-bearers. The Imperium demands its purification." Cassian's hand tightened on his gladius. "Word-bearers?" Dorn nodded. "Traitor Astartes, the first to worship chaos. They spread heresy through faith and flame." Aelius's jaw clenched. "Then faith will be our weapon too." The Legion's fleet was unlike any other. The Mechanicus had forged ships bearing Roman names: Aquila Invictus, Mars Ultor, Legion's pride. The crews chanted in Latin hymns adapted from ancient prayers. The soldiers boarded, rank by rank, their crimson cloaks gleaming in the half-light. Servo-choirs sang as engines roared to life. Aelius stood on the command bridge, staring into the endless stars. Inquisitor Dorn watched him from the shadows. "You understand, Legate. The moment your legion draws blood, you will become part of the imperial myth, the Emperor's chosen resurgent." He turned, eyes cold and resolute. "Then let history remember Rome, not for its fall, but for its return." Warp translation was agony. Even with Mechanicus shielding and navigators blessed by the Emperor's light, the journey to Veneris IV tore at the minds of men. The Romans were untrained in warp travel. Many saw visions of impossible cities, heard voices speaking in their mother tongue, long-dead generals offering advice from beyond time. Cassian emerged from the medbay, pale and shaking. "They whispered to me, Marcus, the dead legionaries. They said—" "Do not listen," Aelius interrupted sharply. "The gods of the void speak lies." "But they knew my name." Aelius placed a hand on his shoulder. "So did the oracles of Delphi, and yet Rome endured despite them." When the fleet arrived in Venera's system, the world below burned. Once a shrine world of marble cathedrals and endless pilgrims, it was now choked in black smoke. Vast sigils of chaos scorched the landscape. Statues of the emperor had been melted into twisted idols of the dark gods. Over Vox, the voices of imperial survivors screamed for salvation. Aelius turned to Dorn. "Permission to strike?" The Inquisitor gave a single nod. "Purge the heretics. Leave none to spread their words." The legion descended in drop barges shaped like bronze eagles. They landed amid ruined plazas and shattered basilicas, where corrupted Astartes in crimson armor awaited, word-bearers chanting in their blasphemous tongue. The Romans formed shield walls under bolter fire, their disciplined ranks deflecting the enemy's fury. Lace bolts lanced through the smoke, gladii cut through cultists. Cassian led the left flank, his voice echoing through the Vox amplifiers. "Formations! Advance! Spears of soul! Strike!" And they did. Every motion precise, every thrust lethal. The word-bearers sneered at first, then their laughter faded. These were no frightened mortals. These were soldiers born in a world where gods were carved from flesh and marble. Aelius charged the center line, slamming his powered gladius through a traitor's chest. "Roma Invictus!" he roared, and the cry spread like wildfire. The traitor marines fell back. Demonic entities clawed through the warp, howling, but found no fear in the Romans' hearts, only grim, ancient faith. Inquisitor Dorn watched from orbit, her eyes wide as the Vox net filled with battle chants in a language older than the Imperium itself. "Ave Imperator! Ave Roma! Lux Aeterna!" She whispered, almost reverently. "They fight as if the Emperor himself marches with them." And perhaps he did. For as Aelius lifted his bloodied banner amid the flames, the sky itself split open, and from the clouds of war poured golden light. A vision appeared before the armies, not the emperor's face, but his shadow, vast and luminous. Every Roman dropped to one knee, even the demons recoiled. A single command thundered through the burning city. "Remember what you were, become what you must." Aelius rose slowly, face bathed in divine fire. "Then by your will, my emperor," he said, "Rome shall march into hell itself." And in the heart of the chaos-infested world, the Legio Roma Aeterna advanced, not as relics, but as prophecy. But in the warp above, Tzinch smiled. "Oh, how beautiful the past can be when used to shape the future." The great game had a new piece on its board, and Rome, as always, was both empire and target.
The siege of Veneris IV raged for 9 days. By the 10th, the once sacred city of Sancta Gloria was reduced to rubble, its cathedrals burning like pyres to forgotten saints. The air shimmered with radiation, psychic energy, and the metallic tang of spilled blood. Legate Marcus Aelius stood atop the broken dome of the Basilica Imperialis, his armor blackened with soot, his blade crackling with residual warp light. Below him, the Legio Roma Aeterna held their ground against wave after wave of heretics, daemons, and warp-twisted machines that blasphemed against physics itself. Every assault broke upon the Roman shield wall. The word-bearers, enraged that mortal men, mere flesh, defied them, called upon darker powers. A great portal tore open in the plaza, spilling forth a horde of daemons wreathed in screaming fire. Horned beasts, wielding blades of molten hate, surged forward. The Romans did not break. Centurion Cassian barked orders over the roar of chaos. "Hold the line! In columne! Testudo!" Shields locked, spears thrust. The air shook as daemons slammed against adamantium and ceramite. Fire washed over the formation, yet behind every shield was a prayer, and behind every prayer was the will of Rome. Aelius raised the Aquila high. The banner burned with golden radiance, its wings spread wide. "Romans," he cried, "the gods of this world are false. The true God watches, the Emperor eternal. Let your fury be your faith." The cry became a storm. "Ave Imperator! Ave Roma!" The line advanced, step by step, unyielding. The word-bearer's dark apostle, a massive figure draped in chains and scripture of blood, watched from the steps of a desecrated chapel. His eyes were twin furnaces of hatred. "So," he sneered, "the corpse god breeds new toys? You think your ancient discipline can outlast eternity?" Aelius turned to him, pointing his blade. "No discipline lasts forever, but faith can conquer time itself." The apostle laughed. "Then come, little general of ghosts. Let us see whose God stands when this world burns." They met amid fire and ruin. Aelius moved like a man possessed, his blade a blur of radiant energy. The apostle's daemon weapon shrieked as it struck, each clash bending reality around them. The earth split, statues crumbled, the sky screamed with unseen voices. At last, Aelius plunged his gladius through the heretic's chest. For the emperor, for Rome. The apostle spat blood and hissed, "Rome, Rome died millennia ago." Aelius's visor glowed white-hot. "Then let history fear its resurrection." He tore the blade free. The apostle fell, screaming, as his body dissolved into ash. The warp rift shuddered. The daemons wailed as the light of the Aquila grew blinding. Every Roman raised their eyes to it, chanting as the symbol flared like a second sun. And then, silence. The rift imploded. The fires faded. The dead lay still. Veneris IV was free.
In the aftermath, the surviving citizens crawled from their shelters to see their deliverers. They expected Space Marines or Imperial Guard. Instead, they found men in bronze and red, faces human and proud, carrying banners of a forgotten age. An old priest approached Aelius, tears streaking his soot-stained cheeks. "Who are you, my lord?" Aelius looked down upon him, voice steady and solemn. "We are the sons of Terra. We are the will of the Imperium reborn in iron and faith. We are Rome." The crowd fell to their knees. The chant began softly, then thundered across the ruins. "Ave Roma Aeterna! Ave Imperator!" Aboard the Aquila Invictus, Inquisitor Dorn recorded her final report. The experiment succeeds beyond all projection. The Legio Roma Aeterna have proven not only efficient but inspirational. Their structure, discipline, and faith rekindle a spirit long absent from the Imperium's soul. The Emperor's will manifests through ancient flesh. Humanity remembers what it was before it became afraid. But at the end of the report, she added something she did not send. "And yet, I see in them the same flaw that doomed the ancient empire: pride. Rome may rise again, but will it serve or will it rule?" Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Terra, in the vaults below the golden throne, a flicker of psychic light stirred. For the briefest instant, the Emperor's eyes, sealed and unseen for 10,000 years, opened. And in that moment, the Astronomicon flared across the galaxy, brighter than it had in centuries. Every psychic wept blood. Every navigator screamed in unison. The Imperium trembled, sensing a change too vast to name. Somewhere in the void, Aelius felt it too. He turned his gaze to the stars. "The Emperor watches," he whispered, "and he remembers." But beyond the veil, the warp gods also stirred. Tzeentch smiled beneath 1,000 masks. The wheel turns once more. Khorne roared with delight. New blood for the old wars. Slaanesh whispered, savoring the echo, "And such beautiful pride to corrupt." Nurgle sighed happily. "Ah, how Rome will rot again in time." And so the game continued. The galaxy would burn, the Imperium would falter, but amid the fire, the Legio Roma Aeterna would march, undaunted, unbroken, eternal. For even in the 41st millennium, Rome still stands. The banners of the Legio Roma Aeterna now hang in the Hall of Heroes aboard the Aquila Invictus. They gleam like living flame, gold, crimson, and black, beside those of 1,000 other crusades long forgotten. But unlike the rest, these banners are not relics of the past. They are living history reborn. The Legio did not fade into myth. They expanded.
Inquisitor Dorn's experiment became doctrine. Entire regiments were formed under the Roman template, the Legion Astartes Antiqua. From Cadia's ruins to the hive worlds of Segmentum Solar, their reputation grew. They brought order to chaos, unity to fear, and discipline to madness. Each legion carried the Aquila not as a symbol of tyranny, but as a promise of civilization reborn. And yet, with glory came suspicion. The Adeptus Astartes saw in them not brothers, but rivals. The Ultramarines sent emissaries demanding they swear fealty to the Codex. The Black Templars saw heresy in their ancient oaths. Even the Custodes, the Emperor's silent guardians, watched with motionless scrutiny. For the first time in millennia, men of flesh dared to stand beside angels of war and not tremble. When a detachment of the Imperial Fists arrived on Veneris 4th, they found Aelius and his soldiers rebuilding the city in marble and steel. The Fist's chaplain approached, his armor gleaming gold in the crimson sun. "You play at empire, mortal. The Emperor needs servants, not kings." Aelius looked up from his work, sweat streaking his soot-darkened face. "Rome serves," he said quietly, "but Rome also remembers. The Emperor may be divine, but he was once a man, and it was men who built his throne." The two warriors stared at each other, one forged by gene seed, the other by will alone. In the silence between them lay 10,000 years of history, of glory and decay, of ambition and sacrifice. Finally, the chaplain nodded. "Then serve well, Legate. The galaxy bleeds, and there is work enough for all who bear the eagle." And so, grudgingly, the Adeptus Astartes recognized them, not as equals, but as necessary. The Legio Roma Aeterna spread across the stars. On hive worlds they restored law. On frontier planets they built aqueducts and fortresses that would last 1,000 years. They brought literacy where there had only been chains. Some said they conquered not with bolters, but with civilization itself. The people whispered new prayers. The Emperor protects, but Rome rebuilds. It was heresy to some, hope to others. Years later, as the warp storms thickened and the Astronomicon flickered, Aelius stood once more beneath an alien sky. His hair was gray now, his armor scarred, but his eyes still burned with that same fire, that unbreakable will. Around him, his soldiers prepared for yet another campaign, banners snapping in the toxic wind. Cassian approached, carrying the Aquila, its wings humming with faint psychic energy. "Another war, my friend," he said. Aelius smiled faintly. "There is always another war." He turned to face the horizon, a burning world where shadows moved like serpents in the mist. "Do you think the Emperor truly sees us?" Cassian asked softly. Aelius watched the flames. "He does, and perhaps in some quiet part of his endless mind he remembers what it was to dream, as we do now." He raised his sword. "Form ranks! Rome marches once more!" The horns of the Legio Roma Aeterna sounded, a sound lost for 40 millennia, reborn amid ash and ruin.
As they advanced into the fire, the vox channels crackled across the Imperium. From Terra to Ultramarine, from Catachan to Armageddon, warriors paused for a heartbeat as an ancient transmission echoed through the void. Roma Aeterna, ad astra, ave imperator. The Emperor's light flared once more. And somewhere, far beyond the stars, the old gods of Terra, Mars, Jupiter, Minerva, whispered from the dust of forgotten myths, "They have found us again." The galaxy burns, empires crumble, gods rise and fall, but through it all, one truth remains: Rome does not die. Rome endures. Rome conquers. Rome becomes eternal. And in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, Rome marches still.